Go right. All right. I see we live. See how long we gonna stay live. Let me get it together. Get it together. Yes, sir. All right. See how we going down. See if we can get through this whole session without some crazy internet stuff, right? All right. So peace to everybody. Peace and love. Baragani, Islam, Salam, Hete Pu, Rahubat, Jinolako Ninani, Chief Noble Bandele Elami, back again on the scene. All right. Today's video, we're going to be dealing with the explanation of nationality dealing with Moors. Okay, so we're going to look at and see if being a Moor is really a nationality, because one of the main components to Moorish Americans is the fact of nationality, right? So we're gonna break down what's really going on and what is really meant by that statement and how it's being used. Okay. So before we get into any of that today, please check out any of my book merchandise, and it's on Amazon. We got the Moorish Moabite, we got the Canaanite Connection, the latest book. We got Moorish treaties. So if you got the first treaty book, this one goes deeper into different treaties, right? And for everybody who's doing some work, everybody who do work, doing their spiritual work, they're going to need a journal, right? To write down everything. So why not get a journal that reflects your culture, right? So check out the journal. I got the hardback or the paper, right? So you can check all these out on Amazon under Bandele Elamine or Yobachi Elamine. All right. So please check out the merch, and please subscribe to the channel and like this video so that we can get more, algorithm jumping and do some things. All right. And please share this video as well. Right. So, all right. So with all that being said, right, let's get into some science, right? So one of the things that we discuss is the fact that you have Moors always talking about nationality. I'm one of them. You know what I'm saying? Like even we talk about some of the books I got. There's a couple other books too, y'all. But I'm trying to find the one that's on nationality, right? Birthrights and nationality. We talk about birthrights and nationality. We talk about Moors and having nationality. I was always brought up in the Moor science way of nationality, right? But I began to notice what it really was, because when you look at how Moors and what Moors are, when you start looking at it, you start relating it to a different type of understanding, or it really comes under a different title as well. Okay, so back in the day they called it nationality, but in today's terminology, you would look at yourself more as an ethno-religious institution. Okay, so let's say this. Let's look at a couple things, right, to show you what we're talking about. So let's look at it. We're talking about ethno-religious, or ethno-religion, ethno-religious, right? So let's look at it. All right. So when you look at ethno-religious, it says an ethno-religious group is a grouping of people who is unified by a common religious and ethnic background. Okay, so let's look at the ethno-religious group. Okay, let's look at it, because a lot of this has to do with culture. Okay, when we do, like when we looking at Moors and what binds us together, it's really the ethnicity of the Moors is one, but also there's a cultural, there's a few cultural like similarities. One of the cultural similarities is most Americans here in the United States, from which Noble Drew Ali and them come out of. Those group of people were talking to the so-called Afro Americans of the day. They was talking to the Black Americans of today, trying to show them that they wasn't black, they weren't Negro or colored, right? And they was trying to show them a cultural experience along with giving them a sense of tie back into their history. All right. So let's look at this though. Ethno-religious group. An ethno-religious group is a grouping of people who are unified by a common religious and ethnic background. Furthermore, the term ethno-religious group, among with ethno-regional and ethno-linguistic groups, is a subcategory of ethnicity and is used as evidence of belief in a common culture or ancestry. So, as melanated people here in the United States and South America and abroad, you have a certain ethnic background. The melanated people in the Americas have a certain ethnic background. Either before slavery, they had an ethnic background because they come from the Aboriginal or indigenous group of people that they come from, but they also created a cultural ethnic understanding in their land now, like in Americas. Like Americans have a particular way they do things, especially like Americans in North America. When you see certain brothers or certain things that we do in our culture that we have developed here over the past 500 years that created a certain cultural or ethnic cultural background for those people. So let's look at this. It is a subcategory of ethnicity, but it's a belief in common culture and ancestry. So we're talking about two things. We're talking about culture, right, that they created here and that they brought from their old ways. But then you got ancestry. So we all are related, okay? Meaning my great grandmother was from a certain area in the Americas. Your great grandmother comes from certain type of Americas, a certain cultural connection they had even then. Okay, so let's look. If we go back to our great grandmothers, okay, the ancestry of those are us. Okay, so they're talking about the connection of Moors, because as Moors, this is something that it's been passed down to us for generation to generation. Our ancestors were Moors, right? What I mean by that, our ancestors come from Western Africa, North Africa. You got Moors that have indigenous here in the Americas, right? Those people are called Moors. Those people were called Moors, right? So, if your great grandmother was called a Moor, right, through your ancestry, you're still a Moor. So, like as an ethno-religious group, they're looking at your culture and ancestry. They're also looking at a common religious background. So, a lot of Moors have taken on Islam. That's a religious connection that they have. Or some like us, a lot of us as Moors have taken on the more of the indigenous cultural religious belief, okay, which also connects us as a religious group, because you can have more than one religious group in a ethno group, okay, because it's also combined to culture and ancestry. So let's look at this. In a narrow sense, they refer to the groups whose religious and ethnic traditions are historically linked. Okay? Sounds familiar. The elements that are defined as characteristics of an ethno-religious group are social character, historical experience, theological beliefs. Okay? These are the characteristics. So far, a Moor does carry on these particular characteristics. So in closing, the community takes place through a strict endogamy, right, which is specifically for the community and that distinguishes an ethno-religious community that is as distinct from any other group. Okay, so these characteristics that are found here are distinct to a certain group. In general, ethno-religious communities define their ethnic identity, listen, not only by ancestral heritage, nor simply by religious affiliation. Okay, so that's part of what we're saying. You know, there are Moors that are of different religious affiliation. Okay, but they carry ancestral heritage. But it says either or doesn't necessarily determine it. So, okay, so it says that, but normally through a combination of both. Okay, the ethno-religious group has a shared history and a cultural tradition, which can be defined as religious on its own. In many cases, ethno-religious groups are ethno-cultural groups with a traditional ethnic religion. So that goes back to being Moors, because we both know that Moors in their history weren't always Islamic. Okay, it's what we talk about Islamic today, but they did carry their traditional religious views. Okay, we looked at videos in the past where we looked at Libya and places like that, which were also under Moors, and their religious group was different than Islam. Islam came into that area, a lot later after being a Moor, had been established. So, to go on, some ethno-religious groups' identities are reinforced by experience of living within a larger community. Ethno-religious groups can be tied to ethnic nationalism. Okay? So when we're talking about nationality, when we talk about it as Moors, okay, we're not talking about nationality in the same way as when you talk about a Japanese American or a Chinese American or different. Those are distinct countries, right? But being a Moor is not from one place. There were many Moors over an area of land that had been classified as a Moor due to certain characteristics they carried that we're talking about. So when we're talking about nationalism, it's more of an ethnic nationalism. So that's an important term to understand when we're dealing with nationalism in that perspective. Because I say this because if you look at the Moorish Science Temple of America, they teach more of a religious doctrine than they do actual national, like as speaking as from a national, like that's a nationality. Okay, it's more of a religious than it is national, but there is national in the Moorish Science Temple of America, and that nationalism can be discussed and looked at more of an ethnic national. Okay, so if we're talking about ethnic nationalism, it says if the ethno-religious group possesses a historical base in a specific region, In many ethno-religious groups, emphasis is placed upon religious endogamy, okay, and the concurrent discouragement of interfaith marriages or intercourse as means of preserving the stability and historical longevity of the community and culture, which this becomes a problem where Moors actually did this as well back in the day when they started intermixing with other other ethnic groups. So when you started dealing with Europeans or Albions and mixing with them, or mixing with any other group that's not necessarily in your community, that is part of the preservation of your ethnic, religious or ethnic nationalism. So being proud of who you are is a form of an ethnic nationalism. Okay, because being a Moor, or even when you look at Black Power per se, okay, when we just using the term Black Power for the sake of the term, I understand what Black is, but we're saying just the Black Power movement is an ethnic national cry for all people of a certain ethnic background to come together. And in the same regards with the Moors, a Moor, when we look at all of us, instead of being black, we're Moor. That the Moor and that the ethnicity of being a Moor is part of the national standard. Okay, so I'm just saying this to understand the terms and effects of how nationalism is perceived in the Moorish culture. Okay, because the term Moor is still yet a general term for those who are of Moorish descent, meaning North, West Africa, things like we said. It's not a particular one spot that they say they're as Moors. Okay. You had an empire, and under the empire there was a lot of groups who became as Moors, like Romans. Like if you look at Rome had its start in Rome, but it spread and conquered into so many lands. All those people were considered Romans, citizens. So they were brought into the Roman society. They weren't necessarily original Roman, indigenous Roman. They had become Roman through nationalism, right? So when Rome fell, all those people who remembered being under Rome, they considered themselves Roman, but that's not necessarily telling them they're distinct, because they could have been German. They were a Germanic tribe who brought into Rome. So it doesn't, the nationalistic aspect of it doesn't necessarily give you your full who you really are, but an ethnic religious nationalism ties you back to something more than just a nationality, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so let me check it out, y'all. Let me see what's going on in the building. Y'all please subscribe, like, comment. Let's see what's going on. Let's see what the comments. So, I'm hoping that y'all understand like what's really going on, right? Because when I came into the Moorish Science Temple over 20 years ago, I wasn't really given the aspect of what we think nationality is, right? It's a lot of it has to do with religion in there, and like I said, I'm not knocking or anything, right? Okay, so we got my man there. I would say that you right to a degree, right? I would say you right. He's saying that people don't call themselves Moors anymore, right? I really, yeah. I'm back, coming back in. All right, I'm coming back in. Yo, like I said, man, I don't know what be happening with this internet, right? But it really do be tripping on me, right? But I see the brother has something on here. We got a brother who's really, um, making some argument upon what's being said, right? So saying that the Moorish science isn't the same as the Moorish Empire, okay, I mean, yeah. So basically what we're talking about are people right now today that are considering themselves Moors, okay? Because there are a lot of people that still consider themselves Moors. Um, to the other question, you're saying that Moors were defeated in the late 1400s and no one calls themselves Moors anymore. That's the other one, like I said, there are people that call themselves Moors today, and so what we're talking about is to those that are Moors. If you're not a Moor or you're not consider yourself a Moor, then this is not what we're talking. We're not talking to you. You know what I mean? Like I'm not here to. I'm not. This ain't even the one that to argue about if y'all Moors or not. We're talking about the Moors that understand Moors and nationality through the Moorish Science Temple of America or from subdivisions of that, because we're given a more clear understanding of what they mean or what they're talking about as far as nationality is concerned. Now, what we was talking about with the ethno-religious group, right? And basically, we was breaking down the ethno-religious group where it was saying that. Let's get back if I can get my screen back up. If it, the thing is just running slow. Okay, there we go. You're not on here. Okay, so we talking about. We go back to ethno-religious, right? Has been applied by reliable sources to the following groups, right? So if you look at these people, like, look, the different ethnic fusions, right? One of them we're gonna discuss is these group, the Yazidis, okay? Because the Yazidis or the Kurds, they call them. The Yazidis are the Kurds, right? Those groups are very similar into how we're looked at, okay? Over here in the Americas, how we as a group of people, kind of like a nation within a nation, we call ourselves a nation within a nation, right? So a lot of that is possibly like you look at yourself as like a nationless person or things of that nature, right? So we wanted, like so I said, we kind of want to get into that whole national, what is the nationality aspect of it, okay? Another group I feel like is considered to be similar is Jews. Jews and Moor, like when you talk about a Moor, you say, oh, okay, it's a Moor who says they come from Northwest Africa. Their descendants come from that. Their religious views kind of reflect some of that Islamic, if you will. A lot of them were Islamic, in the later years. By the time the Moors were so-called defeated in the 1400s, a lot of them were considered Islamic, right? So a lot of these Moors today are taking on those particular similarities. They have a certain religion. So it's kind of like a Jew. You got Jews who are like a Jew is supposed to be somebody born of the tribe Judea, or in a broader sense, somebody's from a group of people who believe in a certain religious practice that allegedly comes from Moses, right? So that group of people, they consider themselves a group of Jews. Now, there was Jews around when there was not a nation. Before Israel existed, you know, when I'm talking about before 1948, the Jews were wandering around, you know, in different countries. They lived in different countries. So they was German. They was German. German Jewish. You see what I'm saying? They was German, but they were still Jews. A lot of them hid who they were because of, you know, prosecution or whatever. But what I'm saying is, even when you changed your name and you said you was no longer Jewish, you still was Jewish, because people consider you a Jewish based on certain principles that are not necessarily just religion. Okay, and that's what I'm saying with Moors. Moors are very similar in the fact that you can't necessarily just say I'm the same religion, but it's certain lineages or ethnic relationships that we have that connect us to that. So it wouldn't necessarily, you know, when you say a Jew, that's not a nationality. You know, that's an ethno-national principle. The Zionists were Jews with a national principle. That's ethno or ethnic religious or ethnic national, right? Goes back to what we was talking about. So I do look at Jews like that, right? So let's look at Kurds real quick. I'm gonna go back to the page, see what's going on, 'cause I know my man, he going in. All right, so let's look at Kurds real quick, okay? Let's go back to Kurds. Like I said, y'all like the video. You know, if you send it, you know, share this video, subscribe to the channel. You know what we do. You know, you look at a lot of our videos. We just make you think, okay? A lot of this is making you think. So we talking about who are the Kurds. The Kurds, right? Why I'm talking about the Kurds? The Kurds can be similar to the so-called indigenous, the millions of indigenous people in the Americas, right? Look at this. Tell me if this don't sound familiar. Between 25 to 35 million Kurds inhabit in mountainous regions straddling the borders of Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Iran, Armenia. They make up the fourth largest ethnic group in the Middle East, but they have never obtained a permanent nation state. See, what they did was, you was Moors, or you can consider yourself a Moor through the treaty back in the day, back in the 1700s, back in the 1800s. If you was not considered black, you could have been considered a Moor. Okay, so back then you had a choice, right? But now, instead of you creating your own nation state, right? Instead of the melanated people in America being able to create their own nation state, you know, taking over some land and creating their own, instead of that happening, you became a 14th Amendment citizen. Okay, well, as people are waking up and they don't want to be part of the 14th Amendment, when you're not part of the 14th Amendment, what are you part of? Because you say you're part of the Moorish nation, but where is the Moorish nation? Like, I'm not against this brother who, I know that he's dropping some things on me. I'm a Moor, but I'm not sitting here and not realizing that there are problems with being a Moor that are not being addressed properly. And that's one of the things. If you're not a 14th Amendment and you're not subject to that, you're a Moor under what nationality, what national group? Okay? And really, the Moors don't have a permanent nation state. The Moors in America, the melanated people in America, even y'all so-called pro-blacks, okay, have not obtained a nation state. So in a sense, Let's understand it from the Kurds. The Kurds not having a nation state. The Kurds are one of the indigenous people. You hear this? Of the Mesopotamian plains and the highlands, and what is now known as southeastern Turkey, northeastern Syria, okay, Armenia. So it's a group of these Kurds, these nationalist people, who wandering around in these areas for the most part. Okay, think about it. They're in this area. All right. So today they form a distinctive community, united through what? They're united. So this is what I'm trying to say, because if we Moors and we looking at trying to create a unified group, right? You have to be united through your race, your culture, and language, even though they do not have no standard dialect. They adhere to numerous different religions. Listen, they adhere to a number of different religions and creeds, although the majority are Sunni. So we can see it like this. If you're looking at it on a macrocosm, if you look at all the melanated people in the Americas, most of them is Christian. Okay, but just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that we're not connected. Okay, through our race, our culture, and our language. Our religions are not necessarily the final say so, because through race and culture we still stand together. Okay, it's not that it's not just us. I mean, as melanated people, we are Christian, Islamic, Jewish, Rasta, all these different all these different type of religious creeds, right? When we came over here, everybody had different religious creeds. Okay, that's not the problem. So through race, culture, and language are the key to having a united community throughout all this wide area that they live in. I just want y'all to think. Right? Why don't they have a state? The Kurds have been considered the creation of homeland after World War One, after the defeat of the Ottomans, right? So this sound like us, because a lot of people don't know that Oklahoma was supposed to be between the melanated people and the indigenous people, which are kind of sometimes one and the same. But those groups were supposed to have Oklahoma, and so in the same way, the Kurds were supposed to have some land and they didn't get it, so it left them out there. Okay. So I just want y'all to see that. I'm not going to go all over into the whole thing, right? But look at the relationship and the similarities of the Kurds and the Moorish people, right? So I want y'all to understand this, because we talk about the Moors, and the Moors are more of an ethnicity, right? It says total population 8 billion. Based on nationality and ethnicity, a person can be easily identified. So the purpose for nationalities and ethnicities are to identify you with somewhere in the scope of the world. So it says that a person can be easily identified to which country or ethnic group they belong to. Nationality implies a place of a person's birth. So it is simply the national identity of an individual. On the other hand, the ethnicity reflects excuse me. The ethnicity reflects the cultural and ancestral identity of a person. So when we talk about nationality, a place of person's birth, a place of person birth. If we living in America, then we would be considered something under Americas. Whatever nationalities are practiced in America, you would be under it. That's why they call themselves. That's why they call themselves Moorish American. Okay, that's why they call themselves Moorish American, because American is the national, is where they at. That's where they born. Okay, that's really what that is. Because the ethnicity, which is the Moors is reflects what your cultural and ancestral identity of. So if you say that you Black American, then you're with, what is your ethnicity? Your ethnicity is Black. Black as a culture, or if you're calling yourself Negro American, I mean, like those titles are not necessarily even in the same respect as Moor. Okay. So, nationality is used to determine to which country a person belongs, whereas ethnicity describes the social group to which a person belongs. When you say you're a Moor, you're saying you're part of an ethnic group of people that practice a certain way. That's what you're saying when you say you're a Moor. You're giving them your ethnicity. So let's look at, now I could be wrong. Let's look at it. Let's keep looking at it. Let's look at this. Let's look at the difference. Ethnicity refers to a person's identity in relation to the social, cultural, or religious group. You hear that? So a Moor is ethnicity. A nationality connotes membership of a person in a country, describing his or her connection with the political state. So ethnicity ties you back. The basis of that is you got kind of got the same lingo, you got the same religious beliefs, kind of. You got a cultural that's the same, and your race. So your skin color, your race. You know, like they look at somebody and say, "Oh, you're Japanese, you're Chinese." They don't even know if they're Chinese or Japanese. They kind of say they're Asian. So they put them in the ethnic lump of Asian. Okay, but they could be Japan, Japanese, Chinese, you know, these type of things, right? So being a Moor is more saying, hey, I'm part of a particular ethnic group of people. Okay? Now it says your nationality is your birth or inheritance. So this is where they try to tie in when you talk about nationality in the Moorish temple. Your inheritance, your birthright, your inheritance. So they try to tie that national. So that's the national part that's coming in. But most of this is dealing with ethnicity, heritage, or ancestry. Nationality is legal status. So this is where the confusion, because they try to say, okay, if I'm a Moor, I'm under this. But being a Moor and how it is set up today, it is more of an ethnic group of people that you identify with, because there is no national entity that stands as a national representative for Moors in a legal sense. We've got different organizations and we got different religious institutions, but they're not being used in that way. But we gonna get to that. We gonna get to the religious part, because you know that's our thing. And so it arises from ethnic background. This one says geographical location. A lot of Moors say they from America. A lot of Moors are from North and West Africa. Even with North and West Africa, they're not from a particular part. Some of them are from West Africa. So you got people from Nigeria and these places that were part of the Moorish Empire. Then you got a lot of North Africans like Morocco, or even over up into Libya, that consider themselves as Moors or under the Moorish banner. So the geographical location of Moors is vast and wide, and there's not one particular spot that is being claimed by Moors today. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's see what else is going on. All right, so they're asking the question: why don't you correct your status and become a state national? You can correct your status and be a state national. Okay, being a state national is not. It's a way to do it. You can be a Moor and a state national because, like I'm saying, being a Moor doesn't necessarily give you the legal status that you think. That's why when you going into court and you talking this and that, they're not looking at that because they're looking at you like you a Jew or something. And let's keep it real. If you're Jewish, Jews have a very good understanding of the law, and they use their religious. Okay, they lose their religious right, and that's what we got to look at. If we're Moors, it's an ethnic, cultural, religious group. We have religious rights based on our religion that go back to our ancestors, that we practice, that we have a protection under through our religious group. But for your question, yes, become a state national. That is one aspect. If you become a state national versus a 14th Amendment federal citizen, right? A federal citizen, it's a difference. So yes, I agree with that. All right? Because let's look at the Moors. Let's look at the Moors. The Moors are a medieval Muslim inhabitants of Al-Andalus, the Arabian, Spain, right? They was part of Spain, the Maghreb, Western Africa, whose culture is often called Moorish. The word was used more generally, right, in Europe to refer to anyone Arab or Africans. Sometimes a blackamoor, if he was, I guess, super dark. But it's telling you right there that these were general terms. So being a Moorish person would be like being Asian, right? Which I feel like when you say an Asian American, you know that you're talking about somebody that is in a particular areas of the world, right? Like they gonna either be, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, possibly Filipino, these type of things. You might not be able to just by sight. They're gonna say that determination, but once you talk to them, they can give you a more direct terminology by saying, "No, well, I'm not. Yeah, I'm Asian American, but I'm Chinese American." So that's different. You're a Moor, right? In a general term, it's general. The name Moor derives from the ancient tribe Mare or the kingdom Mauritania, under Muslim rule produced society. Now I understand Mauritania is so old. Mauritania go back. The kingdom of Mauritania go back before Islam, right? And you see that it says, that Muslim, Jews, and they all coexisted in a mutual tolerance under Moors. Which, in this time they're talking about, in this time frame, they're talking about Muslims. A lot of it is Islamic at this point, right? So when they talk about Moors, they're talking about a group of Islamic type people that they come back in Roman times. Before there were Moors, Muslims, black, so-called dark-skinned, melanated people that lived among the Romans were called Moors to describe who they would come from. Oh yeah, they're Moors. They're like, Africans, dark-skinned people. They didn't call them black or Negro or colored back in Roman time. They called them Moors. So it's a general term, and I'm not saying this to like disrespect or take away from what being a Moor is, because I do consider myself a Moor. Despite that, but realistically, I'm looking at the term and having a better understanding of what the term really is and how it's really being conveyed, how it's being conveyed to society. But being a Moor means that you have a particular ethnic religious right. you and your religious organizations. So as a Moor, you might be Islamic. Under Islam, you have particular rules. You have a religion. Under indigenous religions like voodoo or Santeria or even like Native American religious spiritual beliefs, those beliefs are also religion. Those are your religious beliefs. Okay? So you have to use your religious belief. This is what Noble Drew Ali was doing when he made the Moorish Temple of America. When he made the Moorish Temple of America, he created a religious group, a religious ethno organization. So he's using religion, and he created a religious doctrine that could be measured in law. So when you go in, you've got your own Quran, you got your religious book. It tells you how you're supposed to live. Right? We got the Quran. We got our ancestral covenant book. These are our books to use when we're dealing with law to protect yourself. Okay? Look at the term Moor. Moor comes from the Greek word. Now I'm gonna give a shout out to my dude Elasazai with his video, and he broke down that term from the Hebrew script, right? And the term go back to really mean something of enlightenment, light, these type of things, right? But for the sake, as it comes down and being translated, by the time it gets to Greek and Latin, it's used as a term of black. I mean, meaning black or very dark. Now, I'm going to say it like this. In ancient times, they didn't call people black. They didn't do that. There was no term for black. They didn't call people black. They didn't call people white. These are more modern terms that they're trying to use to describe to you what they're saying. But by no question did they use the term black. They would have said swarthy, meaning very dark. Being very dark does not mean black. Okay? So, the term comes from Moro. We all know this, right? The Latin word for black. See, and this is what I wanted to mean to you. See, the Latin word for black was not Moro, but Niger, which I did a video. Y'all check that video out with Niger and more, right? This is like part 2 coming into this, right? But we're talking about Niger meant black. Or Fusco meant very dark. Moro did not mean those things, okay? Moors were described as very dark. Okay? So Moors were described as very dark, not black. Due to the relevance of this population in the Iberian Peninsula during the Middle Ages, this term have entered English and other European languages that's exposed to this group. So this goes back when the brother was trying to say they don't use that word. It's Spanish word moro, to emphasize that the black or dark-skinned Africans as separate people, a separate group of people. So that separate group of people, dark-skinned Africans, dark-skinned people, are us, Moors. That's us. Okay? When they talk about the word Ethiopian, you know, we learned the word Ethiopian means divided, right? Here they're talking about the word in the Greek sense, how the Greeks looked at it, meaning dark-skinned person. The word was applied only to some Ethiopians and to certain other dark or black-skinned Africans. With few poetical exceptions, it was not applied to Egyptians or the inhabitants of Northwest Africa, such as Carthaginians, Numidians, or Moors. Okay? So Ethiopian was not for all people. It was only for some in a certain area. The rest of the people that was dark-skinned or very dark were considered Moors. So as Moors, if this is what we're looking at, right? If this is what we're claiming as a title to connect ourselves back to ancient time, right? Understand how it's used in this context, and that it is more of a ethno national than it is anything else, right? So let's get into it. Let's get into some more, right? So we got, what's the question on here? Let's get into it. Why don't you okay, hold on, let's go. It says, okay, Aaron Clark saying I am not a 14th or 16th Amendment citizen. All right, so the brother is saying that he's not a 14th Amendment citizen or 16th Amendment, and I'm not here to argue against that. Okay, if that's how you identify yourself, then that's true. If you are a dark-skinned, melanated person, you may be a state citizen. So I don't know what state you live in, but let's just use any state for example. Let's say you are a national of Texas. Okay, you're a state Texan person, right? You are a state Texan citizen. Okay, being in Texas is going to tell you where you come from. Okay, he's an American Texan. He's out of Texas. But it doesn't necessarily explain your ethnic, religious, or ethnic national viewpoint. So when I say, like in the title of this thing, it's talking about that nationality is the order of the day still, regardless if Moor is not necessarily a nationality in its terms, but it's still the order of the day, because being a Moor is putting you under an ethnic, religious, national standard, much like the Kurds, that you are something, but you are a citizen of a particular area. So your nationality would be under your citizenship. When you're a citizen of something, you're usually a member. Let's look at the word citizen, right? Let's look at the word citizen. All right. It would have that, right? Let's go through it. Let's just do a quick definition, right? Let's go through a quick definition. We just giving you a basic, right? A native or naturalized person who owes allegiance to a government and is entitled to protection from it. Okay, so a citizen. So if you're a citizen of, let's say, Texas, or you're a citizen of Ohio, then you're pledging your allegiance to that government of that state and the protections that that state gives you. That's where you derive your power. You derive your power from your citizenship. Okay? So, if you are a citizen of a state, then so be it. If you can do that. Okay? A member of a state, inhabitant of a city or town, a civilian as distinguished from a specialized servant of the state. So, understand what citizen is. You are not a 14th Amendment or a 16th Amendment citizen. You are under the state, all right? That's basically what I'm saying. You're under the state, if you get what I'm saying. About your heritage that was taken away. Okay, like your heritage, your culture, these things was taken away from you. Okay, They couldn't take away your color. They couldn't take away their skin color, your ethnicity, in a way, but they took away your culture. They took away your creeds, right? So even if you are a citizen of Texas or California or wherever in these states are, even if you are, what is your ethnic national stand as a collective? Because regardless if I like the color of the term black power, black nationalism, the nationalism is what is the order of the day. The nationalism is what Malcolm had gravitated toward. Nationalizing people, creating an ethnic, religious, national standard, right? That allows you to come together as a unified group of people. And like the Kurds, like we said, when you look back at the Kurds, right? I think it's gone, but when you look back at what the Kurds said, right? The Kurds were a group of people that all were nationless, right? Most of us, that's how we feel. Most of us feel like we are nationless people. I'm gonna tell you. Let's break this whole national thing down too. The reason why they created the 14th Amendment in the first place was because the state would not allow melanated people to become a citizen of your state. That was the reason why. Just think about it. If all the states in the United States in 1868, right, or 1860s, whatever, if all those states allowed melanated people to become citizens of the state, there wouldn't have been any need to create the 14th Amendment. Okay, so the reason why the 14th Amendment is there, it was to force the states to accept nationality, to accept melanated people as a citizen. Now, it was a state citizenship. I mean, it was not a state, but it was a federal citizenship that they gave you, and they forced the states to accept a federal citizen. And the 14th. Okay, hold on. Let's go back, man. Let's look at the 14th Amendment. Y'all talking about the Dow and stuff. Let's look at the 14th Amendment. We talk about the 14th Amendment all the time, but I mean, sometimes we got to revisit, right? What was they saying? I'm just going to read this. We go into it, though. Let's look at it. All right. It says, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of the citizens of the United States. So they're talking about the United States. They say it's the United States Corporation, but what they're talking about is the United States as a federal entity. Okay, the federal states being the federal government. So no state can enforce any law that shall take away the privileges given to them by the federal government. That's basically what it's saying. Okay, let's just break it down. So the federal government came in, intervened, and said that you guys have to allow anybody born in your state to be a citizen of your state and the federal government. Let's go look at it. Let's look at the actual clause. Right? Let's look at it real quick, man. Because let's say the 14th Amendment is not used, right? Does that mean that if you don't recognize the 14th Amendment in your state, does that mean the state has to recognize it? because that state did not necessarily have you as a citizen. We're going to look at that too real quick, man. I mean, we're going to have to do that, right? But it says right here, all persons born. All persons, okay? We know about that term. We're not going to get into that tonight, but look up persons. If you don't know what a person is, we're not going to deal with it right now. All persons born or naturalized in the United States. So naturalized in the federal territories or the federal government's eyes are subject to the jurisdiction thereof and are citizens of the United States, aka citizens of the federal government. And, but look, it says, and of the state wherein they reside. So it says that you are a citizen of the United States and the state that you live in. So in order for you to be a citizen as a melanated person, the only way is that you have to argue with the state that you should be allowed to be a citizen, right? Because you ain't a citizen unless the 14th Amendment is backing it. The 14th Amendment is making the states accept you as a citizen of a state. So before the 14th Amendment, a melanated person could live in Illinois, right? Let's use Illinois because we talked about that before. A person could live in the state of Illinois, a melanated person, okay, and not be a citizen of Illinois. They just live in the state. They were not given the rights of citizenship in that state. So instead of them being under the rules of the citizens, they were placed under black codes. Okay? That's what they was under. So the United States federal government, in order to ensure that melanated people had rights in every state, they created the 14th Amendment and a federal government, a federal citizenship to enforce privileges on the state. Does that make sense? Let's try to look it up. Let me look it up. Let's look it up. State citizenship, all right? Let's look at it because that's what you got to do. If you get rid of the 14th Amendment, so if you're going to use, if you're not under the 14th Amendment, then you could not do it, okay? And so look at this. Before the 14th Amendment, a native born was a citizen of the state. And a native born citizen of the United States went abroad. Before the 14th Amendment, an alien or foreigner could become a naturalized citizen of the United States or a naturalized citizen of the state. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. Let's look at how you're looking at it. Because for real, I want y'all to understand something. If that was true, right, they should have been enforcing what was already on the books. If you could become a citizen, if you was born, like these people were born, like a black person was born, right? Look, now we're going to talk about it. Citizenship in the United States was established by the Supreme Court case Dred Scott. You can't get past Dred Scott when you're dealing with that, right? Citizenship in the United States was established by the Supreme Court. Instead of distinguishing between a citizen of the state under the Constitution and the laws of the individual state, and a citizen of the state under the Constitution and laws of the United States. This is what Chief Justice Taney said. He made a distinction between a citizen of the state under the Constitution and laws of the individual state, okay, and a citizen of the United States under the Constitution and laws of the United States. Because of this, citizenship of the United States became a constitutional reality instead of an international status. Did y'all hear that? Okay, so let's look. Let's look. Let me go back. Before the 14th Amendment, a native-born citizen was a citizen of the state, and a native-born citizen of the United States went abroad. So when you was not under, so when you were in the United States, you was only you was a citizen to that state. Very interesting. And when you were outside of the United States or outside of your state, you was protected as a United States citizen. Before the 14th Amendment, an alien or a foreigner would become naturalized citizen of the United States or a naturalized citizen of the state. A naturalized citizen of the United States domiciled in a state became a citizen of that state, that is, a citizen of the United States, as well as a citizen of the state. So they already had that right for a record. Why did they need a 14th Amendment? If you already could do that, it was already understood. It was already understood that you could do that. Okay? But now look, let's go to this. Let's go to this. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. Let's see what they say about it. Because I want you to understand. Let's look at it. Let's look at it. If they're going to give it up. Let's look at it. 14 minutes old, one citizen crisis. Okay, let's look at it. This is the problem. This is why I want you to understand what the problem was for melanated people. Because if you was somebody else accepted by the United States as a person coming from with a nationality, right? They respected that. You could become a citizen of the state and a United States citizen, right? They said it before the 14th Amendment. Look, 150 years ago, the United States was hard at work to find a citizenship. Okay, let's get to it though. We're talking about slavery. In the wake of Civil War, abolished slavery. The question demanded resolution. Okay, they lived and labored for generations in legal limbo. They, meaning the melanated people or the people, the free slaves and their descendants, they lived and labored for generations in a legal limbo that the new 14th Amendment birthright citizenship promised to resolve. So what was a limbo? What was the limbo? Huh? Let's look at it. Free African Americans had origins and system of captivity, blah blah blah, right? And worked as free laborers. Still, they experienced this coverage when it came to their citizenship. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to say. In both instances, the nation permitted people to establish thriving communities without resolving their legal status. This history and two enduring aspirations link former slaves and unauthorized immigrants across 150 years. Okay, non-citizens, threats of non-citizenship. Former slaves and their descendants faced the threat of non-citizenship. If you was an ex-slave, black, Negro, colored, whatever they was, you was not allowed to be a citizen of the state. So, if you don't have the 14th Amendment and you try to go back and say, I'm a state citizen, can the state go back to their original thought on the subject matter and say, well, the only reason why you guys have citizenship is because the 14th Amendment. So if you're not a 14th Amendment, and are you able to go get citizenship from your state? I mean, like, my thing is, If you're not going to use the 14th Amendment as an argument, the 14th Amendment can't be argued. You got to go back to the old way. The old way said that if you were born and naturalized, but if you are considered a former slave, okay, if you're considered coming as a descendant of a former slave, then are you allowed to have citizenship if you can't use the 14th Amendment? What are you calling yourself? And that's why I was saying that nationality is the order of the day as a Moor, as an ethno-religious society. Because if you're saying you're a Moor, okay, let's get into this. Let's see what we say. Let's see what we're saying. Let's see what the argument is here today. Or not even an argument. Let's read what our brothers got to say. It is important to understand who is the real Americans. It's important for us to understand who's the real Americans, right? And a Native American applies to Aboriginals or copper-colored races found in Europea. Okay. A native of America applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans. Okay. There are, and I'm gonna do a video on that too, because we all know that there are natives that were dark-skinned, like he say, copper-colored races here in the Americas before they got here, right? And a lot of times that's what they labeled when they came here. They was like, oh, there's Moors here too. So they labeled a lot of the indigenous people Moors because they were dark-skinned. So yes, in a sense, I'm in agreement with that statement, even though I know there's more to it. 14 USC. 1481 USC, U.S. Loss of nationality. That is true. When you look up 14 USC, matter of fact, let's look at it. Let's look at Let's look at 1481 USC. All right, let's look at it. Let's see what it says. I've read this before. Right. Loss of nationality, native born, right? By the way, it's 8 USC, right? 8 USC. Voluntary actions, burden of proof, presumptions. Right? A person who is a national of the United States, born or a naturalization, shall lose his nationality by volunteering performance any of the following acts with the intention of relinquishing U.S. nationality. Right. So that's good that you got this, because we do got to understand that the 1481 come right out of the 14th Amendment. We do know that, right? We do understand that this come right out of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is a complicated thing. It's an ugly piece that if you get rid of, you have to have something else to cover you, because you wasn't covered. You wasn't covered under anything else when you was before the 14th Amendment. Before the 14th Amendment, you was black. You was black, Negro, and you ain't had no nationality, no nothing. But Moors, they did. I mean, we do know that, right? We do know that there are people who were Moors that were so dark that they was considered black to other people. But they were distinguished as Moors. And they had a particular legal covering. They was covered under legal terms. So because most of the people wasn't considering themselves Moors in the time in the 1800s. By that time, a lot of people wasn't looking at Moors. They didn't know what a Moor was. Most black people did not know they were Moors. So they fighting under the system that they was under, and that's why they were losing. So my thing is, if you're not a 14th Amendment and you're not Moorish, if you're not using the ethno national standard of being a Moor, then you can't be a state citizen, because you weren't allowed to be a state citizen without the 14th Amendment. And as my brother has shown right here, in 1481, the loss of nationality by a native born or a naturalized citizen. You can lose your nationality, or you could have never had. Like, the thing about it is, in the state of mind that the indigenous people, the indigenous and the melanated aboriginals from Africa, both of those group of people were stripped of their nationality and classified and grouped into a whole different thing. They were all grouped into being black, Negro, color, whether they was indigenous to America or they were indigenous to Africa. Anybody who that they considered dark skinned were all chopped up into one thing. It's kind of like what Brother Pleasant Bay, when he talks about sardines. If anybody know about sardines, sardines are like there are groups of fish that they chop up, or small fish. They're not all like sardines is not a group of fish. Sardines are groups of different fish packed together as into one can, and in that one can they call sardines. And so what they're saying about us is we've been grouped and claimed into one group, considering ourselves sardines. Being black, Negro, or color is equivalent to being a sardine. So with the ethno religious, the ethno nationalist viewpoint of being a Moor, it gives you an abundance of possibility outside of just being black, Negro, and color. And I'm not talking about that you're not black and proud, because I understand the spiritual aspect, but I'm saying as a national, when you're talking about yourself, it's like the Kurds don't call themselves light skinned. You know what I mean? Like, they don't say, oh, the Kurds mean light skinned people, or light brown. Like, they don't classify themselves as light brown or brown, right? They call themselves Kurds, which is a general term that places them all under one ethnic religious background. So either they can be from Syria and speaking Muslim, or they can be in Iraq speaking their cultural language. Even they all still coming together as Kurds, despite where they live at. That's the important. I think that's the main, the most important part of this is that we got to look at, right? So let's look at it. Let's look at it, right? Let's get into it, because you're right. We gotta wake up. Let's look at the other questions, right? I'm glad my people waking up to realizing we are under extreme identity crisis. Exactly. You see what I'm saying? We are under identity crisis. That's why, a lot of our, like, if we go back 100 years ago, prior, like, to, 100. Let's go back 150 years ago. To the birth of Pan-Africanism, and the birth of, all these different things like Moorish, Islamic identities. We've always been trying to connect back to something greater than just being under the slave history, right? And with that being said, we all cannot come to an agreement on what we should be. Everybody is banging against another group. and we're banging against each other for religious differences. Like how many of y'all Christian is not going to want to really get down with a Muslim brother because you don't think that he's saved, because he don't believe in Jesus in the same way you do? Or let's even go deeper. You got the Nation of Islam and the Moorish Temple of America, who have similar, they come out of the same sect or group, right? But they cannot seem to come together under one name, because Nation of Islam say the black man is God, or the black man, and the Moors say we Moors. So y'all gonna argue black versus Moor. Y'all argue that, or the African centered Pan-Africanists or black pro-black. Those people consider themselves black or African, right? And even me coming out of that whole paradigm of Pan-Africanism, I totally understand. Connecting to African history, which is a lot of our history too. A lot of us did come from there. I'm gonna do a video on that too, because a lot of people did come from Africa, or either came from Africa through slavery, or came over here on their own. Okay, prior to any of this, prior to European colonization. Okay, it's fitting that we having this talk today on Indigenous Day. Because we always talking about Columbus, but that Columbus did bring Africans over here, and he was enslaving indigenous people, right? So that must not be taken away. But the fact is that we don't have an identity. We're arguing our identity. My identity I claim is Moors. So there's a group of us. There's many of us that claim Moors. I'm not here to claim that Moors was they were all good. Moors did bad things in history. I'm not here to discuss how bad we were, but I still connect to that ethno group, because other ethno groups don't have, I guess, like the same. They don't go back as far. You got brothers doing the what is it, ADOS. We did a video on that. We got brothers like talking about we are the what is it called, the original blacks, or that's here in America, ADOS or whatever. But even those don't go back. They only go back like a few hundred years. They don't go back all the way back. So I think with an ethno-religious, that ties you into something that's bigger and older than you presently are. That's what the Moorish temple was trying to do. I think that's what Noble Drew Ali was trying to do. Why he chose these terms versus being black, Negro, or color. Okay, so that's my thought on that particular aspect, because I'm not here to disrespect any of the brothers. I'm not here to respect Noble Drew Ali or any of them, right? Let's look at this one though. The next one up. My brother saying this is why the pale troglodyte Saxons came up with titles that strip us from our natural status. Exactly, like the troglodyte or the Anglos, man. These Anglos, they wanted to classify you because they understood in their world that, for example, if you had a nationality, if you were from a respectable country, regardless if they were at war or not, right? They would still distinguish that you are still from the country of the worlds, the country of nations, right? That you come from somewhere that they recognize. So you wouldn't become a slave. You would become a prisoner of war. And with that, there's a different way to handle a prisoner of war. A prisoner of war can be bought back, right? A prisoner of war still carries their national or their heritage, their culture. They still carry that. A slave is expected to give up their way. Okay. If y'all watched any like the old Roman shows like Spartacus, like when you look at Spartacus, Spartacus was a Thracian. They basically told him that as a slave, forget being a Thracian. Being a Thracian is an enemy of Rome. Don't work. We don't respect Thracian. All you are is Spartacus, a name given to him by the slave master, right? And he was supposed to forget his past. So a slave was to forget the past. A prisoner of war was not going to forget their past. They still were intact. They could be negotiated and recovered by another nation. Slaves had no nation ties. They were cut off from nations. In order to make a slave, you have to strip them of their natural status. And if that's what you notice, when the European went around the world, he stripped them out of their national status. Because he went everywhere around the world. He was all up in the Philippines, Malaysia, India, everywhere he went. And they were dark-skinned, melanated people, right? He stripped them of their natural status. Okay? And relabeled them. So, it's very true. It goes down. Let's go back into it. Let's go back into it. Let's go back into it. Making in the United States. Okay, let's go to it. He says that in the 1481 loss of nationality goes to the notes section. Scroll down to the rights of expatriation. Read that and what mentions about American citizens. Right. Let's go down and see what it says. Hold up. Is the guy not? Cause I know what you're saying when you talk about the expatriation. Like a lot of people are trying to expatriate, right? You're trying to leave the United States. A lot of people are leaving the United States. I'm trying to see where it is, brother, because I know what you're talking about. I might have to go to another one. Whenever the loss of United States nationality is put in issue in any action or proceeding commenced on or after 1961, under the virtue of provisions of this chapter or any other act, the burden shall be upon the person or party claiming that such loss occurred to establish such claim by a preponderance of the evidence. Any person who commits or performs or who has committed or performed any act of expatriation under the provisions of this chapter or any other act shall be presumed to have done so voluntarily. But such presumption may be rebutted upon a showing by a preponderance of evidence that a act or acts committed or performed were not done voluntarily. All right. So even with that being said, that your act, like let's say you lost your nationality, like let's say as a melanated person being from Americas or even being brought to the Americas, losing your nationality, you didn't lose it voluntarily. It was taken from you by force. You know, if you watch some videos, even with like Dan Calloway, what is it? Dan Calloway, isn't that his name? I don't agree with a lot of what he's saying sometimes, but the point that he makes is that in a lot of cities and counties, that they would change the name of certain native tribes and made them consider themselves black. They made them black. They would make anybody black. So even if you was a Moor, right? Like say you was a Moor back then, they would make you black. They would change the name of anybody who had any type of tie back to any rights. So you didn't lose your nationality based on a voluntary act. So in that case, if you was to use the loss of nationality and say that it was lost by force, then I mean that is an argument, right? That is an argument. Now my thing is though, when we look back in the 1800s, you're really gonna have to argue that back then it was wrong for them to do it, and that you got nationality based on what your forefathers lost. So our forefathers lost their nationalities in the 1600s out, right? 1400s. We go back 1400. We started losing our nationality in 1400s, right? But we didn't lose our nationality to the United States. We lost our nationality to whatever nation we was part of. Like if we was part of Cherokee or whatever, that nation of Cherokee, we might have lost our nationality to that, or whatever the native nationality was. We lost that. We didn't lose United States nationality. Truthfully, we never given nationality of the United States. They never gave us the ability to have a nationality in the United States. The only inkling that they have is the 14th Amendment. And that's why I tell people, most people don't even know the 14th Amendment. They don't even know the 14th Amendment. And that's something that we teach in class, the 14th Amendment, right? There is no more on there. I went all the way down to the end. I mean, unless you go into this part, you tell me what part in here, because I don't see it. But I know what you're talking about, because I've read it. And because I can't find it, if you could paraphrase it and put it in the chat and put it in the comment section so that we can get on it, because I'm not trying to not discuss it, because it's open forum for that. So if you can put that in there, then we'll check it out. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna put it up and so we can look at it. So expatriate from the United States, which no is a corporation, right. United States of America, North, Central, South, and actual country, which is our land, right. You expatriate from the United States corporation, and then you say that you are the United States of America, North, Central, and South. The thing about that is we can claim that, but you need something to go with that, because there is no nation of that. That's just land. You're talking about land. There's no national government that will accept you under that. That's what I'm saying. Like you gotta look at this. Like the Jews. The Jews are what we like. You look at the Jews. The Jews with their backing, and they're in the news now for all this stuff, but they took and created an actual nation. They was granted an actual nation. I mean, I'm not saying it was, how it was done, but what I'm saying is they actually created a nation. Now, if we was to say that we created a nation under the North, Central, and South, okay, and unified with that, then that could be considered a nation. But when you expatriate from the United States government, you are a nationalist person, just like the Kurds. Like if the Kurds, like if you look at a Kurd, and they live in Syria, they might be a Syrian national or Syrian citizen. But if they was like, no, I'm part of my Kurd heritage family, which they are stateless. They don't have a state of their own. They just got an ethno-religious. And that's what I'm saying. Like, expatriating is one thing, but becoming part of an ethno-national organized group that's considered that under their, but a lot of us are individuals. We individually do these things. We individually want to expatriate or put up some type of expatriation or definition to why we've expatriated, but we haven't come under any other fold of government, and we're out here solo. That's not how it works. We got to come together. That's why when Noble Drew Ali is saying, in my opinion, okay, based on my overstanding, when Noble Drew Ali was saying that nationality is the order of the day, it was a rally cry to unify under an ethnic religious group that he created. Like, truthfully, Noble Drew Ali kind of created what we look at as the ethno-religious group. He kind of put it back together. It was like there were Moors out here, but as an organization, as he came together and created a cultural, ethnic lineage that you could come into and claim and be part of, and use that temple or that institution to protect yourself, because you're not under the 14th Amendment no more. So if you're not under the 14th Amendment, right, and you've expatriated from the United States corporation, then you are out here on your own. And you can say, like, and I'm not saying nothing wrong, but I'm saying, like, if we say, oh, well, I'm part of the North American Confederation, and you don't have an institution that reflects that, and you're standing by yourself, okay, we got to come together. You got to have brothers from everywhere that come together as one institution and is able to validate. They're able to validate and defend and protect you better than your European counterpart with the 14th Amendment. If you understand what I'm saying, there's got to be a protection. That's why, like, even with, like, the Temple of New Kemet is used to protect the members that are part of it through contracting, which we get into a lot of that. We're not going to get into it necessarily in this video, but my brother Keng which is on here all the time, he talks about that a lot on the channel and on Facebook. But through ethno-religious nationalism, ethnic religious groups coming together and contracting together as a unit, having an institution that validate the legal paperwork that are put into place, is going to be the key in which what they was doing, what Noble Drew Ali was doing. So me personally, if you guys are out there solo, doing more stuff by yourself, y'all need to come into a fold. Y'all need to come into the fold. You see what I'm saying? So I mean, that's pretty much it, man. And if y'all got anything else to scroll talk about on here, we can talk about it. If not, I'm gonna jump off of here. Appreciate y'all. If y'all like, please like the video. We're gonna have more discussions on this. I'm I'm not here to bang nothing down your head. I'm just here to make us think a little bit more about the nationality, the Moorish nationality. You see what I'm saying? I'm here to break it down, what it really is, so that we can all come together. Because we too fragmented as a group of people to be efficient in any endeavor that we are doing. As fractionized people, everybody by themselves wanting to be more on their own. You know, I get so many calls of people doing that. So, you know, I'm just saying, like, let's break it down. You know, let's break down nationality, what it really is, what it really means to Moors. Okay, it doesn't mean the same thing to Moors as it does an Albion. Okay, because as a Moor, we're talking about our ethno-religious background, our culture, right? Where when the Albion, so-called Europeans, or what you call so-called white people, those people are talking about nationality as a whole different perspective. You see what I'm saying? Like the whole sovereign citizen thing. That sovereign citizen thing is European Albions using that to nationalize themselves. They're the ones that call themselves patriots. Those patriots are patriotic to their national government that they believe that was put together by George Washington. Okay, they believe that in that. That's not our particular same plight. That's not where we're coming from. You know, even when we talking about all these rules and stuff, if we use our ethnic, religious rights that are governed to us through the Constitution, through First Amendment, and even in the United States, the United Nations, okay, the United Nations respects and they protect religious institutions, right? So, like Noble Drew Ali, if we create our institutions in our area, okay, that's why you got to have a temple in your area. You got to have a temple with a community of people that are under the same ethno-religious background or ethnic national background, right? You got to have it. Right? If you are in an area, you can't do this by yourself. You have to organize, and you have to seek out your people. You have to seek out your ethno-religious group. Okay? And bring the culture and the ancestry together. And every one of us protect each other. Okay? That's the ultimate key. So, like I said, with that being said, I'm out of here, y'all. I'm out. Alright? Peace. Tuta Nana.